Welcome to the Money Over 50 podcast, brought to you by Dallas Davison and Michael Hogue from Money Over 50 Financial Advisors. This information is general in nature and does not take into account your objectives, financial situation, or needs. Therefore, you should consider whether the information is appropriate for you and your personal circumstances. If you require personal advice, please contact Money Over 50 Financial Advisors. Here are your hosts, Dallas Davison and Michael Hogue.
Welcome to Money Over 50 with Michael. How much income can you draw from $100,000 of retirement savings, Dallas?
Thanks, Michael. This was, I guess, a more practical podcast from me. Normally I'm just spouting about philosophical things and the psychology of money and all sorts of, things like that. But
topics like, what is the point of it all? Really deep Friedrich Nietzsche type psychological discussions.
Yeah, no, so
you're renowned for. So.
Yeah, I've gotten more into your wheelhouse here with something a bit more practical, a bit more nuts and bolts. So what I was talking about here is, so for a lot of people, they think of their retirement savings as one big bucket. And so, for example, if you want to draw $100,000 a year in retirement income forever and a day, you probably need, we've talked about this before, you probably need about 20 times that figure. So you probably want about $2 million. If you want to draw $50,000 a year, you probably need about $1 million, those sorts of things. So that's what I would, that's sort of the bucket of money that I think of as you're really treating that as you don't want to run that out. You really, the reason why you only want to draw out that 5% figure is because you don't want to run the risk of running that money out. So you need to be able to draw, if it's the $100,000 that you need to live the lifestyle you want, you need to be able to draw that every year for the next 30 years is sort of our expected life expectancy for a couple in retirement. Now, for a lot of people though, when you're retired, your income doesn't stay the same for the whole 30 years that you're retired. Like most people that we talk to have things, particularly in that first 5 to 10 years of their retirement, that they really want to do. A lot of it is travel. So most people, I would say that we talk to, 80, 90%, plan to do some travel in retirement. And so if you're looking at retiring at 65 and you really want to, I think, treat it as there's really two buckets of money here. There's your retirement savings that you go, okay, we're going to draw out the amount of income that we need forever and a day out of there. We want to go and travel and do some more of those sorts of fun things in the first 5 to 10 years. You almost want to have a separate bucket of money that you intend to run down over the first 5, 10 years of your retirement or potentially a bit longer. That the point of it is to fund some of those expenses that you know aren't going to go on forever. And so on a very practical basis here, what I've just looked at is if you had $100,000 of extra retirement savings, how much income can you draw out of that with a view to running it down in those early years of retirement? So have I explained at all there what I'm talking about with this $100,000?
So the $100,000 is a fluid figure. So what I take out of that
is
exactly. That in this example, $85,000 of that is going to be money that you need to generate as an income forever and a day, but $15,000 of that is travel, for example.
Yep.
Or it could be travel.
Yeah. So
and that's going to taper off at some stage.
Yep.
So at 75 or 78, you're unlikely to be traveling overseas and things like you may be, but you're unlikely to be traveling overseas. So from the core living expenses that you may have as a couple, let's call it $85,000 in this example, then you need a pot of money that's going to
support that
to support that
which
and never run out.
About $1.7 million on average.
However, you have the $15,000 of whilst you never want to run money out for the sake of running money out, you can say, okay, I've got a separate pot of money here, and I'm only going to travel for X amount of years. Now, if I can take my $15,000 a year in travel from this pot of money, if it does run out, that's okay. Because that's going to my ability to travel, my desire to travel is going to taper off at some stage.
And that's a really good example of because we've talked about this many, many times in the podcast about how much income do you need in retirement, and we sort of talk about it as though it's a set figure, and that's not the reality. Is like you just said there, if 85,000 is kind of what you need to meet your basic living expenses plus your basic discretionary spending, and so it's not gonna that's kind of the lifestyle that you want to be living forever and a day. That's fine, but it's normally, like you just said there, you might also say that, well, for the first, say, 10 years of retirement, maybe I'd like to spend an extra $15,000 a year on an overseas trip, whether that's a small trip every year or a $30,000 trip every couple of years. So this is a very common thing. So, and that's, like you said, the two types of income line up with two different buckets of money. So if someone said to me, I really don't want to spend any less than $85,000 a year, that's kind of my core living expenses, I would basically say, okay, well, to provide $85,000 a year worth of income, we need about $1.7 million is sort of the target of what we'd need in retirement savings to spit out that $85,000 every year. And we treat that as one bucket, and we go, okay, that is not, we're not going to be pulling more than that out on a regular basis. We need to allow that to grow. We just pull our $85,000 out of there. Now, if those people also said, separate to that $85,000, in the first, say, 10 years, we want to go and travel, we want to go and do some of these things, the calculation becomes very different there, because you don't necessarily need that extra $15,000. You don't need it to last for the next 30 years. You just need it to last long enough to fund those sorts of trips. So, as you said here, the $100,000 is a fluid concept, but what I just wanted to do as the example is, in that case, if you got to the $1.7 million mark and you said, okay, that's going to allow us to draw the $85,000 a year forever and a day, and we know that our income needs are taken care of. If we were to build up an extra $100,000 of retirement savings, how much income could we draw out of that for how long to be able to fund some of these extra expenses?
So what are the figures, Dallas?
Well, Michael, some examples. So, again, if you drew $5,000 out of your $100,000, that would last you for your whole retirement on average. And again, there's no guarantees here, but on average, that would last you your 30 years of your retirement. Now, like we said, though, if your plan is that you don't need that to last forever, you could draw $10,000 a year out, and that would last on average somewhere around 13 years. So, now, just to clarify, with a lot of these assumptions, I'm just working on a 7% rate of return in retirement. The reality is it doesn't quite work this neatly, because when you have a variable rate of return, which you'd have to have that money invested in, a fair bit invested in companies to be able to get a 7% rate of return. So you're not going to get a nice, neat 7% rate of return every year, and depending on the sequence of these returns, it will be a different thing. But it's just ballpark numbers to get you thinking about this. Is that, so if you said, you're retiring at 65, for example, and you wanted to spend $10,000 a year on a holiday every year, if you're able to build up that extra $100,000 in retirement savings, you would be able to draw that $10,000 a year out for 13 years. So that's kind of, obviously, that you've got the $100,000. It's building up a bit of, it's growing while you're taking your $10,000 out. So your $100,000 grows by $7,000 on average for the year. You take your $10,000 out. At the end of the year, you're still left with $97,000. So you can see there where you can actually take your $10,000 indexed to inflation for 13 years before you actually run out. And that's one of those things where most people, if you're retiring at 65, you probably don't really want to be traveling much past 78 anyway. So
no.
I think so to give you the
I have a client,
yeah,
Liz, that we've spoken about before. She loves travel.
Yeah.
So she's currently at work right now.
Yeah.
On Monday, the 1st of March.
Yep.
So at the end of 2020, we looked at, she had enough to live her base level of retirement income forever and a day, which included some money for travel.
Yep. What
we also looked at then is the trade-off between working an extra 1 to 2 years.
Yep.
And topping up by $100,000 to $200,000. I mean, the equation, I won't go into too many personal figures, of course, but basically, an extra year's work
makes
correlates into roughly an extra $100,000 of retirement savings by virtue of the fact that she has the highest amount of money she's ever had working for her. So it's a return on that. Her money making money, salary sacrifice contributions going in, and employer contributions going in, and living off, of course, the wage. So basically, she is right. She is Liz. I know you'll probably be listening later on, but you're right. You're at work right now on Monday, the 1st of March. So the trade-off discussion was: do you work an extra 1 year or 2 years? Now we're taking it 1 year at a time. But like eating an elephant, one bite at a time. But
what does that?
The trade-off for that made sense because the year goes quickly. And she works in the education system. And my wife's a teacher, so I know they start counting down from the first week of school.
They talk about weeks all the time. My parents are school teachers. They always talk about it's week 7.
It's week 7.
What are you talking about?
What is this week 7? We only have 10 weeks to go. They start counting down from week 1. So we're like more than halfway through the first term, I think we are, until Easter. So the year goes quickly. Now it won't be too long. It'll go just like that, and we'll be sitting down in December of this year, 2021, and Liz would have finished another year. And I'll be able to say, okay, well that's made an extra $100,000 of difference. What can you do with that money? So now tell me those figures again, Dallas.
I know Liz well, and I know her travels really well. So the next one is probably a better example for Liz because she likes to go to some really, really interesting places. And so the $10,000 a year of income lasts you for 13 years. If you were to draw $15,000 a year instead,
from the $100,000.
From the $100,000. So whether that's $15,000 in 1 year or it's $30,000 for a more a bigger trip, a more out there sort of trip every 2 years, that lasts you 8 years. So, and that's probably, to be honest, the one that lines up with most people that we're talking to is that for that first, you're retiring at 65. For that first 8 or so years of your retirement, you want to go on those bucket list trips every year or two, and if for a lot of people it's every 2 years to go on that big trip to the places that they've always wanted to go they haven't seen. So that $15,000 a year or $30,000 every 2 years is normally what our average client is talking about when they're talking about wanting to travel in retirement. So that's, I think, probably the key there is that for Liz in that case, if she can work that extra year, build up that $100,000 of extra retirement savings, we sort of quarantine that off to the side and go, you're going to draw $15,000 a year out of that, and it's going to last you the next 8 years. And that first 8 years of your retirement, which is when you're going to be wanting to go and do all that travel. Now, like you just said, the point there is that it will run out in 8 years' time, and that's fine because you've already got all your basic expenses with a bit of travel built into that. Separate to that, we've quarantined that in the first bucket, but you know that you can run this out over that first 8 years of your retirement, go on some of these, bigger, more out there holidays that are going to cost more money, and you know that when you run that out, it's okay because you've got all your other needs taken care of.
Dallas, it's taken 10 years, but I finally got you talking about siphoning money off. for the last 10 years, you've got, no, it's all together. Money's money. And
when you say siphoning, people are going to think you're some sort of money launderer. What we're talking about here is siloing, I would say.
Siloing money.
So Michael's big on going, this money's here for this and this money's here for this. And I always go, money's money. Money doesn't care what it's for. It's dollars. But you're right. It's not that. So when we talk about having this money quarantined, whether it's actually physically quarantined or whether it's just mentally quarantined or siloed, it's the same sort of thing.
Matter.
Is that you go, what we're trying to achieve here is that we want some of this money to be mentally allocated for, it's for the long term, it's forever. We only draw our basic income needs out of that. We got this extra money off the top here, and generally it is because people have maybe worked a year longer than what they had planned to, or they've come into a bit of a windfall or something like that, and they've got $100,000 that's extra to requirements. You go, what can you do with that? And that's, I mean, I fear at the risk of getting stuck in now another rant about buying a new car. If you look at that $100,000 and think, I can go and buy a $100,000 or a $90,000 brand new car, great, I've got that asset, but then in 10 years' time, it's worth bugger all. or you can treat that 100,000 as this is a bucket of money here that I'm going to run out of on purpose. It's going to fund $15,000 a year worth of travel for me for the next 8 years, for that first 8 years of my retirement. It's going to allow me to see all the things that I've always dreamed of. It's going to allow me to go and have all those experiences, and I know that it's not impacting the rest of my retirement plans. It's a great. I think it's probably the way to do it. You're right, Michael. There is some benefit to siloing of money and treating it as separate.
And if you'd like to talk about this and talk about where you need to be to meet your base level of income needs, and then also talk about how would we top up in order to be able to do these great overseas travel when we're finally allowed to travel again overseas. It's going to happen at some stage. I'm sure we're going to be allowed to do that again. Certainly reach out to us, podcast at mo50.com.au. The process is that from anywhere in Australia, we're able to have a Zoom meeting with you. And the feedback that we've got from the listeners that have actually taken that up is that it's a really, really non-confrontational way to look at their situation and look at a plan of attack. Because it is daunting to have to walk into a financial planner's office and lay your cards on the table. So that's a really, 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 really good way to do it to the start. So we have a 1 hour Zoom meeting, no cost to you and no obligation, certainly. And we start to talk about some of these things. It's very high level at that first meeting. And this is exactly like you say, the high level thing of these trade-offs. We use that word trade-offs all the time, but this is something that we're talking about a lot with our clients. Most people that we meet with, they want to be a self-funded retiree. That's sort of priority number one. They want to be able to make sure they're not going to run out of money in retirement. Priority number two is they want to travel. They want to go and do these fun things. They've got things that they have that they want to be able to go and do and see. And so it's really just the trade-off of going, how much in retirement savings do you need to tick the first box, and how much do you probably need to tick the second box and be able to go and do those things, and are you willing to, like in Liz's case, are you willing to work that bit extra or give up that little bit extra every year to build up that extra bucket of money? And like you say, that's sort of the type of thing we talk about at first meeting. And it's just about those. It's not our place to tell people of what they should or shouldn't be doing. It's their decision then of the trade-offs of what do I really want in those early years of my retirement? How do I fund that? And what do I have to do between now and then to make it happen? Reach out, podcast at mo50.com.au. Thanks for listening.
Thank you for listening to the Money Over 50 podcast with Money Over 50 Financial Advisors. We look forward to catching up again soon.